Welcome back. This is Jennifer, and I'm so glad you're here. Today, I'm revisiting an oldie but goodie technique that I really feel is a must try for everyone because it's a great way to get more from your stamps. As you know, most stamp sets have sentiments included. And what we're going to do is take a bunch of different sentiments and create a background from them. That way we can do a lot of stamping and a lot of cards using all of those sentiments. I'll show you some tricks that really make this easier along the way. Since I am in need of thank you cards, I went through my stamp stash and chose different thank you sentiments, or sentiments that would work good for a thank you background. I'm going to show you the sets that I used just in case you were wondering where one came from. But really just dig through your stash and use what you can. From this Simon Says Stamp Birthday Wishes set, I used the You're One of a Kind sentiment. This is a thank you card, but that sentiment will still work for it. This is an old favorite of mine, the Silhouette Sentiments. I like that there are coordinating dies to cut out these sentiments, but there are a few in there that would work great for this background. I also really like this So Talkative stamp set. It's 6x8 with lots of great sentiments for cards, some unique ones, and I chose I Just Want to Hug You from this. I also used the Friend Greeting stamp set, and I used quite a few from here. I like that there are a mix of sentiment styles in this, so I can get a mix of looks on my background too. So if you have sentiment stamp sets that focus on sentiments, grab that and start there. All right, next up we have this Thankful Wreath stamp set from Simon Says Stamp. There are a bunch of small ones in here that would work well with this thank you background. You could also incorporate one of the larger script thank yous in the background to kind of fill some space if you wanted to. Now from this floral stamp set, I chose a couple different sentiments, sending love and hugs and thinking of you. I thought those would work well. And one of my current favorite sentiment stamp sets is called Missing You. Lots of great sentiments in here to send to someone that you're missing. I used I Wish I Could Hug You with all my heart. Consider this a warm hug, and my love from across the miles. Lots of good ones in here. And then Just a Note from the Simon Says Stamp Just a Note Pansy. There's a few others I used here, but that Just a Note I really like because there is a die to cut that out too. All right, so I grabbed a bunch of these individual sentiments and I have them setting aside. Now it's time to put them together to create a background. I found a trick that is very helpful when doing this. Don't worry if you don't have the tools to do these tricks. I will share other ways to do it as we go. I have a piece of cardstock here that's 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches that will just be my background guide. And I also have a sticky mat that I've cut down to be 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches also. Any kind of sticky mat would work. I'm using a Misty sticky mat because there are multiples in a pack, so I could cut down one and still have others at full size. You'll see a full size one later. So into my Misty stamping tool, I've put that blue piece of cardstock and the sticky mat with the sticky facing up. I am now positioning my stamps, the stamp side down, the back of the stamp is facing up towards the camera, onto that sticky mat. Now the reason the sticky mat is helpful is it has grids, so I can make sure that I'm putting my stamps down straight. Also, it has a little stick to it, so it'll kind of hold that stamp in place as I place others around it. Without having that sticky there, sometimes when you bump one of the other stamps, it knocks it out of position. So this is just helpful in holding it. If you do not have a sticky mat, you could also put a piece of clear acetate there, and the stamps will kind of stick to that too. But I do find that the stick from the sticky mat is very helpful, especially those lines. Those lines are super helpful. Also, by putting that dark color cardstock behind it, I can see my guidelines for how big of a background I need. So I started in the middle and I'm working my way out. I'm just choosing little sentiments that fit into the openings. I put the stamps as close together as I can. Remember, the back of the stamp is facing up, so you should be able to read the sentiments when you put these in place. If you don't want to really worry about your sentiments being straight, you can put everything at a diagonal because then it's not as obvious when they aren't straight. So I just continue to fill in sentiments where I can. I decided I wanted something with a little script to it just to break up all those bold fonts. So I chose the Delicate Floral Frames set from Simon Says Stamp. This has lots of great small sentiments, but also some delicate script ones. So I'll add these also to my background. This takes quite a few stamps, as you can see here. So dig through your stamp sets, pull out any sentiments you can. If you don't have enough to cover a whole background, just create enough to cover half of a background. Then you can stamp them once on the bottom half of your card and then again on the top half of your card. Also, you don't have to fill the entire front. You could just do an area in the center, which you'll see me demonstrate later. Okay, so once I've filled this as much as I can, I close the door on my stamping tool, which will grab all of those stamps. I then can carefully pull away my Misty sticky mat here, and all of my stamps are there in my Misty, ready to stamp a million times if I wanted to. Okay, so now this is a full-size Misty sticky mat. This is one that also comes in the pack. I kept this one full size so that I can use it in my tool to hold my cardstock in place when I stamp on it. So I put a piece of white cardstock in there, and I'm stamping with Simon Says Stamp Pawsitively Saturated Ink. It's just the ink that I grabbed at the moment. This is the guava color. It's beautiful. I'm inking up all of those stamps, and then I will close the door on my stamping tool. And you want to put some muscle into this. You have lots of stamps. Some might be a little thicker than others too, so put some muscle into it. I'm using a pressure tool, which I'll link to below, which allows me to really easily glide pressure over the top, but you can just use the palm of your hand if you prefer. And I'm stamping this twice just to make sure I get a nice crisp impression for all of those images. And then take a look at this. We have this fun background created with individual sentiment stamps. If you find one looks a little bit crooked, you can go ahead and adjust it. By the way, later I'll talk about how you can do this if you do not have a stamping tool. All right, now let's put that background stamp that we created to use. Here I'm layering stenciling with that background stamp. So let's start with the stenciling first. I have picked a layered flower stencil set, and I have my Waffle flower stencil mat. I can put my cardstock into the corner of the mat, and then my first stencil into the corner also. This is really helpful with layering. All right, now I have Simon Says Stamp dye ink. You can use whatever inks you want, and you can use whatever blending brushes you want. I'm going kind of light with the color here. When I go light, I like to tap the excess ink off onto my stencil mat so that it doesn't go on as harsh when I apply the ink to my paper. I'm also going very light-handed. I sometimes like to tap my brush over the open areas when they're very intricate like these, and then also do a bit of blending too. So whatever inks, whatever inking tool you want, just apply that ink kind of soft. All right, now it's time for the second stencil, and I just take that stencil and I pop it right into the corner too. That's the nice thing about having that little nook, that little corner on the stencil mat. You can put your cardstock and stencil there every time, and it'll line up perfectly. All right, now this time I decided to use a light amount of a mint color and apply that on top. Now for the third layering stencil, there are lots of floral openings. Instead of doing all of the flowers the same color, I'm going to do selective inking, and I'm doing some light peach here and there, and then I'll come in with a bubblegum pink to do on the rest of the flowers. By doing this selective inking, you can make your backgrounds more colorful. By the way, you can see my little areas of ink on my stencil mat. I can pick up that ink and apply it to my paper too. So don't let that ink go to waste. You can just pick up color from there and lightly apply it onto your background. Now here we are with the fourth stencil just popped in the corner. This time I'm doing 2 different shades of yellow to the floral openings. So we'll end up with, let's see, 6 different colors, and we used 4 different layering stencils. And check out this beautiful background. I just love the look of that. But I thought I would step it up by adding some text stamping on top. I love the look of layering. So here I have all of our sentiments in place that we did before, and I'm stamping firmly with Simon Says Stamp Fog ink, which is a super, super light gray ink. Now when you stamp it once, it's hard to see it. But that's what I like about this ink. I like that you can stamp it once and it'll be super soft if that's what you want. And then you can stamp it more times if you want it to be a bit darker. I chose to stamp it 3 times, and I was happy with that soft text over our inked flowers. Here's a closer look at it. I just love the look of all of that layering. Next, I trimmed it down to be a little bit smaller than 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. Next, we can create a focal point to add to this. I thought I'd use a combination of die cut scraps along with a stamp sentiment. First up, I'll be using this Simon Says Stamp Orange Blossom Stencil and Coordinating Die Set. I'm not actually using the stencil on this card. I'll use it later in this video. I'm only using the coordinating die to cut that leaf. So the bigger leaf die, I cut that from a background I made in my last video. I used Lindy's magical powders to create some beautiful inky backgrounds, and I had a bunch left over. So I'm using a lot of that today. So this is one of my Lindy's magical powder backgrounds, and I die cut a leaf from that. It has lots of shine and different shades of green to it. I also used the Poppy Stamps Petite Blossoms flower die. This cuts a bunch of different size flowers, and I cut that from one of my leftover backgrounds. By the way, I will link to the video showing how I made these backgrounds up here in the top right, at the end of this video, and in my description below. Now, when I add die cuts to a busy background, I want to make sure there's dimension to them. So I'm going to add stacked die cuts behind each of my colored die cuts. I chose to use the Simon Says Stamp Micro Dot Adhesive Sheets. I've been playing with these for a couple weeks now, and I will tell you, I was very surprised at how well they worked. Let me just explain. So this is an adhesive sheet made up of lots of little dots. I'm peeling up the release paper and laying my die cuts onto those little dots of adhesive. I then press well over it. You can use your finger or bone folder, doesn't really matter. And then when I peel back the release paper, I have turned these die cuts into little stickers. And the reason I was unsure if this would work or not is I've tried methods like this in the past, and I find you get glue goobers around the outside, where there's glue kind of hanging out and the edge is sticky. But thankfully, I think the dots on this are so small that you don't get those goobers on the edge. You'll see a close-up later and you'll see they're goober-free. So I glued 3 white die cuts together and then the pink one on top of that. Another thing that I was pleasantly surprised about with these micro dot adhesive sheets is that you can use the same spot more than once because there are so many dots on there. You'll see me use it again later in this video, and I actually use it in another video coming up that's all the same adhesive sheet. The adhesive sheets are bigger. They're 8.5 by 11. I cut them down to 4 1/4 by 5.5 just to keep them manageable. Now, I will normally use these adhesive sheets only for intricate die cuts, which you'll see later. I think it's a big time saver there. We'll talk about that soon. So here is this completed card. I have stacked die cuts for the leaf, also for the sentiment, and for the flower. I also added a yellow pearl right in the center of the flower, and that's it. I feel like with the shine and variation of color in our scrap die cuts, we have enough. Also, with that soft but layered background that we created with stenciling and our built-up sentiment stamp background. Okay, let's do another card with a completely different look. This time I used our sentiment stamp background to create some white heat embossing on a vellum die cut. So you don't have to use it for the entire background. You can use it for a focal point. Let's start by doing some foiling for our butterfly and our sentiment. This is my Spellbinders Glimmer machine, which allows me to do foiling with hot foil plates. I have the Simon Says Stamp Dancing Butterflies hot foil plate and die. This comes as a set, and I used it in my video yesterday too. I have my hot foil plate on the warm part of the Glimmer machine, and it is completely warmed up. I can lay a piece of Glimmer foil on top. This is matte gold. Then a piece of smooth cardstock. I like to use Hammermill. And then 2 plates that come with the Glimmer machine. I then press the timer button, let the timer run. It's about a minute. When the timer button stops flashing, you take all the plates and platform out of your Glimmer machine and you run it through your Spellbinders die cut machine. The Spellbinders Glimmer machine adds the heat, the die cut machine adds the pressure, which gives beautiful foiling. If you have a different die cut machine, there are other foil machines out there that work the same way. And look at that beautiful matte gold. I'm in love. But the best part is we have that leftover foil, so let's use that now too. I have my Pink Fresh Studios solid hot foil plate. If you have a foil machine, this is a must-have. I lay my leftover foil face down onto the solid hot foil plate, and then a piece of cardstock on top of that, my 2 plates, and I like to put another cardstock shim between those 2 plates whenever I'm using the solid hot foil plate, just to make sure there's extra pressure. I press the timer. When it stops flashing, I give it another minute. Whenever I'm using that solid hot foil plate, I give it a little longer. Then I run that all through my die cut machine. This will transfer the leftover foil onto the cardstock, and now we have the reverse foiled image. And I can use these on additional cards too. Next, we have the coordinating die to cut out the butterflies. And from that leftover foiled cardstock there, I'm cutting the word thankful. That way, my die cut sentiment will match the same gold as my butterflies. I'll run that through my die cut machine, and now we have all these beautiful foiled die cuts. By the way, the Thankful is from the Simon Says Stamp CZ Designs Thankful 1 die set, which includes the word thankful and its shadow. Now here is a good time to use these micro dot adhesive. They're great with intricate dies like this, where putting liquid adhesive on it is a little trickier. So I put some of the micro dot adhesive on the back of my die cut, and I'm gluing the gold on top of a white for that stacked look. I also cut the shadow die from white cardstock, and I'll glue these Thankful word die cuts right on top of that. So you can see how these micro dots are really helpful for this. Really, there are a lot of great adhesives out there. Honestly, it's about finding what works best for you. If you struggled with tiny die cuts like this may be a good option. Now we can create that little focal point piece of vellum with the heat embossing. I like to use vellum on top of busy, bold backgrounds like this one, so it creates a focal point, a softer spot to put your embellishments. So I have a piece of vellum, and I'm using my anti-static powder tool, and I'll stamp with Versamark ink. Now here I wanted to mention to you, if you do not have a stamping tool, you can still do this technique of putting sentiments together. What you could do is work on your work surface, like I have a glass work surface here, and I could lay all of my stamps onto it, backside facing down, the stamping sides facing up. Then I could ink up the stamps and lay my cardstock on top, like you see me kind of doing here. I'm pressing my vellum onto all of those stamps. So you could do that instead if you do not have a stamping tool or don't want to use one. If you also have a large acrylic block, you could arrange your sentiments on that and stamp with it that way. But I always will say a stamping tool is definitely something worth investing in if you want to do a lot of stamping. All right, now we can die cut an oval from this, and onto that vellum oval I have glued one of my foiled butterflies and my layered sentiment. I want to add all of this onto my background. So I'm putting my glue behind where the die cuts are, the white die cuts are. That way it's hidden and I don't have to worry about it showing through the vellum. And I'm gluing that right into the center of our background. This background was created in my last video using those Lindys magical powders. Check that out if you're interested. And I put it onto a white note card. I ended up changing my mind about the foil butterfly. I thought I'd use the regular butterfly. I ended up changing it to the reverse. So there you can see all the shimmer and shine on that background, thanks to those Lindys powders from the last video. And then you have a softer focal point area in the middle because we did that white heat embossing on a piece of vellum, which is a nice backdrop for our foil die cuts. So there's really not much to this, but we made the card extra special by doing that white heat embossed sentiment background on the vellum. Now off screen, I made another card that I wanted to share with you. It has a similar Lindys powders background that's blue and got lots of shimmer to it. This time I stamped our thank you background stamp that we made from the individual sentiments directly onto the Lindys powder background using a dark blue ink. So I like how that makes that background look even more kind of mixed media looking. It's just, I think, something that is eye-catching and really fun to create. On top of the background, I added the Simon Says Stamp Olive Leaves die cuts in white. I put 2 of those die cuts, and then on top of that, I used the Simon Says Stamp Big Thanks die set, which I use a lot, and I cut that from white and black and glued together. Below that, I have a Simon Says Stamp sentiment strip that's pre-printed, so it's easy to cut and add. And then a gold foil butterfly. I actually used some of that leftover gold matte foil from earlier where we cut Thankful and some butterflies. I cut a small butterfly from that and added it right on top of our olive leaf die cut. Okay, my next card features one of my favorite Lindy's magical powder backgrounds from my last video. I love the look of this in the shimmer. I wanted to create a soft focal point in the center, and I have some tips about how to do that. And I'll be using some of the same products and that thank you background we created. I'm taking 2 white die cuts and placing it onto my Brutus Monroe stick and stamp mat, which will just hold it in place as we ink. These die cuts were created using the Orange Blossom stencil and die cut set that I showed you earlier. I cut these from white so we can stencil on top of them. Before we just used the die, now we're using the die and the stencil, and I am in love with this set. I'm not doing the oranges or the blossom, just doing the leaves this time. Now this stick and stamp mat is holding the die cut in place and my stencil in place as we ink. I'm applying a bit of green ink over this, making it heavier towards the center and lighter towards the tips of the leaf. And then I can move over and do the stem of the leaf pretty heavy green. So look at how beautiful that is. So much better than stamping it. Stencils really allow you to give beautiful ink blending. And while I'm here, I'm going to create a smaller leaf too, which I can save for later. Now, I did green at first, but I changed my mind, and I thought it'd be fun if my leaf was blue to match the background. So I did the exact same process, but with blue inks to create that blue leaf that you see here. For the oval behind that, I stamped with a soft pool ink onto white cardstock using our custom thank you background stamp. And again, I'm just cutting out the section that I want with an oval die. You could use any die cut shape you want. Now this is the Simon Says Stamp Script Thanks die set. There is this very intricate thanks sentiment and then the shadow die, which you see over there on the left. I wanted this to match our background and I couldn't find the right color of cardstock. So I just cut it from white, put it on our sticky mat, and then colored it with a marker. So I had just the right color. Now since this is super intricate, I'm putting it onto that micro dot adhesive sheet. So it's sticky on the back now, and I'll stick it right onto our white shadow die cut. That is so much easier than trying to put any other type of adhesive behind it. Again, if you struggle with intricate die cuts, you might want to check out those micro dot adhesive sheets. So I glued all of these pieces together onto a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch card. I like how a lot of that background that I loved is showing around the outside, and everything in the focal point in the center matches it nicely. I did also add a little butterfly, which I will be honest, I found that butterfly die cut on my floor because I have scraps on my floor that I haven't swept up yet. So I just colored it with the same color marker, added it there with a pearl in the center. I like how that thank you background that we created with the individual sentiments adds more to this simple card design. Okay, my final card shows how you can use your sentiments to create kind of a focal point background without covering the entire background. This is also good if you have less sentiment stamps in your collection. You can create a smaller focal point area. But instead of starting over, I'm just going to remove some stamps from what I have already. So I'm removing some from the corners. So I end up with a lot of stamps towards the center and kind of extending up and out a little bit. You'll see when I'm done here. I did reposition a few too. So if you don't have a lot of sentiments, just start in the middle and build out what you can. And that's a nice focal point for a simple card. So here is what I ended up with, and I'm stamping it with Lakeshore ink from Simon Says Stamp onto white cardstock. And look at how it creates a focal point right in the center, but it leaves the corners kind of empty. So you could do a border along a card, you could do the bottom half of a card, you don't have to do the entire thing. Now, on top of this, I thought I would use up some more scraps. I used some of the dies I showed you earlier and cut from some of my Lindy's magical powder backgrounds that are left over. Even the smallest scraps I die cut from, and I glued those onto our background. Now the background is glued onto a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch craft note card. I like that bit of craft showing around the outside edge. And then I added the Sending Love stamped and die cut sentiment right on top of that. Also, I added a few yellow pearls here and there. So here I was able to use up some scraps and also able to use a bunch of sentiments together to create that fun background, which really steps up this simple card. By the way, I stamped kind of a focal point area onto a couple other pieces. Here's another Magical Powders background. Here's one where I didn't cover the entire thing, just to show you some variations that you can get with this technique. All right, I hope this encourages you to try using your little sentiment stamps together to create a fun background. And if you are interested, I will link to the video showing how I use those Lindys magical powders here at the end, and also to another video showing this technique so you can see a different variation. Thanks for visiting. I am always happy when you're here. I'll see you again soon with another video.